Even if Katherine wanted to extend their association, which she didn't, her father would never approve. The Earl of Dorchester hated Wayland to such an extent that Katherine had once loathed the very sight of him as well. However, after the help he'd provided on the last 2 cases she'd investigated, she'd had to admit her father's explanation seemed a bit thin. From what she had observed of Wayland, he had an even stricter moral guideline than she when it came to investigating suspects. What could he possibly have done to make her father think otherwise? Desperate to change the subject, Katherine said, "Yes, where is Lord Bath?" Pru made a face, but no longer nettled her friend about Wayland's absence, at the very least. "I believe I saw him near the doors to the garden." "What would possess him to stand there?" Lady Dalhousie, whom Katherine knew to have a penchant for exaggeration and dramatics, had turned the ballroom of her London manor into an ice fortress. The fact that her servants had been unable to wedge the glass garden doors open any farther than a handspan hadn't deterred her in the least. Now a ghastly ice swan perched in front of the doors, so thin that ice had encroached on the inside and sealed them to the floor. The door had been propped open so the ice didn't melt from the heat of the hearth on the far side of the room, where Katherine stood. Anyone who opted to stand near the swan risked frostbite. Despite the fact that access to the garden had been detoured down the narrow servants' corridor that ran the length of the manor to an innocuous exit, Lady Dalhousie's extravagance had continued into the garden. The early bitter winter hadn't deterred her one bit. She'd sensationalized the cold by commissioning ice sculptures in various shapes, not only that of feathered pests. A footman stood post by the exit to the garden, ready to offer cloaks and muffs to anyone who wished to tour the exhibit. Katherine was not among that number. Indoors, Lady Dalhousie had strewn strings of cheap crystals to reflect the light of the chandelier. They were reminiscent of icicles, very like the prized diamond and aquamarine necklace the hostess wore constantly. The result was a room that sparkled like the falling snow in the gaslight of the street lamps on Pall Mall Street. Pru shrugged. "How should I know Lord Bath's inclinations? Isn't that your task?" When Lord Bath and his grandmother had come to London once more, Katherine's father had invited them both to dinner. Frankly, Katherine had been astonished to find Grandma Bath in London, given how difficult she must find travelling at her advanced age. As it turned out, she had accompanied her grandson to London because she had an agenda: to marry him off. In order to keep herself off the top of the list of marriageable candidates, Katherine had agreed at once to become his matchmaker, even though that did not seem to deter Grandma Bath from trying to persuade her to marry Lord Bath. The bigger problem was that Grandma Bath did not want him to know she was trying to find him a match, and trying to discover what sort of woman would suit Lord Bath without his guessing at the aim of her questions had been a puzzle in itself. A frustrating puzzle. If the Marquess was to be believed, he hadn't the faintest idea of what sort of woman attracted him. "I'll know the right woman when I see her," was not a helpful answer. Neither was suggesting that Katherine's curiosity would be better applied to finding herself a husband. At least he, unlike his grandmother, didn't consider her a candidate. Katherine would accept her small blessings where they came. "I don't see him." The only men near the Swan were a pair of young bucks who appeared thoroughly soused. One gestured to the Swan as if flirting with it, while the second pressed his hand to his mouth to stifle his laughter. Slyly, Pru asked, "Lord Bath or Captain Wayland?" Katherine glared at her friend. "Lord Bath, so you say." Pru lengthened her words. "But I never saw you so concerned with his whereabouts while in Bath." "I wasn't attempting to find him a match in Bath, now was I? That honour was reserved for a different woman." Katherine raised her eyebrows, rewarded by Pru's blush. "Why are you so concerned all of a sudden?